Before we dive into today's story, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Here we reveal the untold side of fame. The alarm screamed at 4:47 a.m., cutting through the London fog like a blade. I've been awake for 3 minutes already. My body clock had become synchronized with production schedules decades ago. But this morning was different. This morning, my hands were shaking as I reached for the bedside lamp. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my palms in the yellow light. 59 years old, and I still got the shakes before the big ones. The really big ones. My mouth tasted like copper pennies, the same metallic tang I'd woken up with the morning I hung from the Burj Khalifa, the morning I climbed onto that cargo plane, the morning after I'd dreamed about falling. The dream again. Always the same dream before these stunts. I'm falling, but it's not the controlled fall OFA movie sequence. It's chaotic, helpless, real. My daughter Suri is watching from the ground, getting smaller and smaller as I plummet. I always wake up just before I hit. "Good morning, Mr. Cruz." James appeared in the doorway, earlier than usual. His tie was crooked, something I'd never seen in the 3 years he'd worked for me. He was carrying my coffee, but his hands weren't quite steady either. "The overnight reports from the stunt team are here." I took the cup and wrapped both hands around it, letting the warmth seep into my fingers. The coffee was perfect, black, no sugar, but I could barely taste it over the adrenaline already flooding my system. Through the hotel windows, London stretched out below us, indifferent and eternal. In a few hours, I'd either be part of its skyline or scattered across it. "James," I said quietly, still staring out at the Thames. "Have you ever done something that scared you so badly you couldn't sleep?" He paused, clearly caught off guard. We didn't usually talk like this. Our relationship was professional, efficient, clean, but something about this morning felt different. Final. "Yes, sir," he said carefully. "My wedding day. I was so terrified I'd mess up my vows that I threw up twice before the ceremony." I almost smiled. "Almost. Did you go through with it anyway?" "Of course. I loved her." I nodded, understanding something I couldn't quite articulate. Love. Fear. The way they twisted together until you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. I loved making movies more than I'd ever love any person, and that love was going to kill me someday. The phone rang. McCory's voice came through the speaker, tighter than usual. "Tom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Shoot." "Last night, after you left the planning session, I called your insurance company. Not to cause trouble, just I don't know, feel better about this whole thing. They told me something interesting." My stomach clenched. "What?" "They said you personally requested that your life insurance policy be reviewed 3 weeks ago, updated all your beneficiaries, made sure everything was current." His voice was barely above a whisper. "Tom, are you expecting to die today?" The question hung in the air like smoke. I set down my coffee cup, my hand trembling slightly. Outside, our River barge moved slowly down the Thames, its lights blinking steadily in the gray dawn. "Christopher," I said finally, "do you know why I started doing my own stunts?" "You said it 1,000 times. Authenticity, giving the audience something real. That's the answer I give in interviews. That's not the truth." Silence stretched between us. I could hear James moving quietly in the background, trying to be invisible. "The truth is, I'm addicted to the moment when you realize you might not survive. That split second when your brain goes completely quiet and all that exists is you and the laws of physics and pure, distilled now, that it's the only time I feel completely alive." Jesus, Tom. The insurance policy isn't because I expect to die today. It's because I realized I'd rather die doing this than live without it. And I needed to make sure that if something happens, the people I love are taken care of. I heard him exhale slowly. When he spoke again, his voice was different. "Resign, maybe. Or understanding. The helicopter's ready. Weather conditions are perfect. The crew's been on standby since midnight. Well, I can still call this off. We can find another way to shoot the sequence." "No," I said, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. "We can't." The drive to the airfield took 43 minutes through morning traffic. I sat in the back of the Range Rover, not reviewing the stunt sequence this time, but thinking about my father. He'd been an electrical engineer, methodical, and careful. He'd never understood my need to throw myself off buildings, to race motorcycles at insane speeds, to trust my life to cables and calculations. "Why can't you just be satisfied with what you have?" He'd asked me once, years ago. "You're successful, you're wealthy, you're famous. Why do you keep pushing?" I hadn't been able to answer him then, but sitting in the back seat, watching London wake up around me, I finally understood. It wasn't about the success or the fame or even the movies. It was about proving Tommy's self, over and over again, that I was more than the scared kid from Syracuse who'd been told he'd never amount to anything because he couldn't read properly. Every impossible stunt was a middle finger to every teacher who'd written me off, every casting director who'd said I was too short, every critic who dismissed me as just a pretty face. But it was also something deeper, a compulsion I couldn't name, couldn't control, couldn't live without. My phone buzzed. A text from Suri. "Dad, I saw on the news that you're doing something crazy today. Please be careful. I love you." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. She was 24 now, old enough to understand that her father was fundamentally broken in some essential way. Old enough to worry that one of these stunts would be the last time she'd hear my voice. I started to type back, then stopped. What could I say? That I was sorry for being the kind of person who needed to hang from helicopters to feel human? That I wished I could be satisfied with a normal life, with safety, with the reasonable boundaries that governed other people's existence? Instead, I typed, "I love you too, kiddo. See you soon." The airfield materialized through the morning mist like something from another world. The helicopter sat in the tarmac, rotors already turning slowly. 7 cameras positioned at strategic angles, 47 crew members, and enough safety equipment to stock a small hospital. All of it focused on one simple, insane objective: watching me risk my life for the entertainment of strangers. As we pulled through the security gates, I caught sight of my reflection in the car window. I looked older than I felt, more tired than I wanted to admit. The lines around my eyes had deepened over the years, carved there by wind and worry and the accumulated stress of 3 decades of cheating death. But my hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped somewhere between the hotel and the airfield that IT always did. Once I committed to a stunt, once I crossed the line between thinking about it and doing it, my body found a kind of calm that was almost supernatural. "We're here, Mr. Cruz," the driver announced. I stepped out onto the tarmac and immediately felt the wind cutting through my jacket. The air smelled off jet fuel and rain and possibility. In the distance, I could see Wade Eastwood pacing near the helicopter, his weathered face creased with concern. Wade had been with me for 15 years. He'd watched me evolve from someone who did stunts because they looked cool to someone who did them because he couldn't stop. He'd also watched me get hurt, really hurt, more times than either of us liked to admit. "Tom," he said as I approached, not bothering with pleasantries, "I need you to look me in the eye and tell me you're not trying to kill yourself today." The question hit me like a physical blow. I stopped walking and stared at him, seeing something in his expression I'd never noticed before. Fear. Not for the stunt, not for the production, but for me. Personal fear, the kind you feel when someone you care about is standing too close to the edge of a cliff. "Wade," I started to say. "No, Tom. Listen to me. I've been doing this job for 30 years. I've worked with every action star in Hollywood, and I've seen what happens when the line between bravery and recklessness gets blurred that you're walking right up to that line." He was right, of course, but the truth was more complicated than he knew. I wasn't trying to kill myself. I was trying to prove I was still alive. "This stunt has a margin for error smaller than anything we've ever attempted," he continued. "If the cable snaps, if the harness fails, if the helicopter hits unexpected turbulence, if the connection point weakens under the G-forces, there's no backup plan, no safety net, no second chances." I nodded slowly, understanding the weight of what he was saying. Every other impossible thing we'd done together had multiple fail-safes, backup systems, ways to minimize risk even while maximizing spectacle. This was different. This was pure trust. Trust in mathematics, trust in engineering, trust in the skills of the pilot and the precision of the equipment. "That's exactly why we have to do it," I said quietly. Because it's never been done before. Because everyone said it was impossible. The helicopter pilot, Marcus, approached with final weather reports. He was a former RAF veteran, steady and professional, but I could see something in his eyes that hadn't been there during our practice runs. Respect, maybe, or pity. Conditions are optimal, he reported. Wind speed steady at 12 knots, visibility unlimited. Flight path approved. Emergency protocols in place. He paused, studying my face. Sir, I've flown combat missions in Afghanistan. I've done search and rescue in North Sea storms. This is the most dangerous thing I've ever been asked to do. I looked at my watch. 9:23 a.m. In 37 minutes, I would either have pulled off the greatest stunt in cinema history, or I'd be dead. There was no middle ground, no partial success, no participation trophy. It was all or nothing. Exactly the way I'd lived my entire life since leaving Syracuse, with nothing but ambition and a willingness to risk everything. As the wardrobe team helped me into the harness, I could feel their hands shaking. The tactical outfit was perfectly tailored, designed to look spectacular on camera while providing maximum freedom off movement. But as they tightened the straps and checked the connection points, I realized something that should have terrified me, but didn't. I was completely calm. The fear was gone. The doubt had evaporated. What remained was something pure and focused and slightly unhinged. The same mental state I'd found before every impossible thing I'd ever done. Not courage, exactly, but its dangerous cousin. The absolute certainty that this moment, right here, was what I'd been put on Earth to do. 5 minutes to positions. McCory called out through his megaphone. Final systems check. I walked toward the helicopter, feeling the weight of the harness, the tightness of the cables, the perfect balance of equipment that would either save my life or fail catastrophically. With each step, the noise of the rotors grew louder, drowning out the nervous chatter of the crew, the distant sound of London waking up, everything except the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat. This was it, the moment I'd been building toward my entire career. Every roll, every risk, every time I'd chosen the hard way over the safe way had led to this single point in time. I was about to trust my life to the precision of machines and the skill of people who were just as scared as I should have been. As I reached for the helicopter's door handle, I touched the small silver compass hanging around my neck, a gift from my father before he died, the only piece of jewelry I ever wore during stunts. He'd given it to him with a simple message. This will always point you home. The door opened. The world fell away, and I stepped into the unknown. As the helicopter door slammed shut and the engines roared to life, my mind did something it always died in moments like this. It traveled backward. Back through the decades, past the fame and the fortune and the impossible stunts, all the way to a cramped apartment in Syracuse, New York, where a 10-year-old boy sat at a kitchen table, staring at words that wouldn't make sense. The letters danced on the page like they were alive, twisting and rearranging themselves every time I tried to focus. BOY became YOB, then BYO, then nothing at all. My teacher, Mrs. Henderson, had used words like learning disabled in hushed conversations with my mother. Words that felt like punches. Thomas, try again, Mom said, her voice gentle but exhausted. She'd been working double shifts since Dad left again. He had a pattern. Disappear for months, come back promising everything would be different, then vanish when things got difficult. I pressed my fingertips against my temples. I can't, Mom. They keep moving. She knelt beside my chair, her uniform smelling like coffee and grease. Yes, you can. You just have to find a different way. But there was no different way for reading. There was only the way everyone else did it. Effortlessly, naturally. I was trapped, surrounded by a language I couldn't decode, feeling stupid and furious all at once. That night, I heard Mom crying through the thin walls. The sound carved itself into my memory, mixing with the shame until I couldn't breathe. School became warfare. Kids snickering when I stumbled over words. Teachers sighing with barely concealed impatience. The principal suggesting I might be better suited for vocational training. But then came Miss Patterson, our young drama teacher with paint-stained fingers and a voice that commanded attention without shouting. "We're doing Romeo and Juliet," she announced to our sixth-grade class. "Thomas, you look like a Romeo to me." "I can't," I blurted, my face burning. "I'm not good at reading things out loud." She studied me. "Can you feel things deeply?" The question caught me off guard. "What? When you're angry, do you feel in your whole body? When you're sad, does it feel like your heart might break?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Then you can act. The reading is just words on paper. Acting is about truth." She worked with me after school for 3 weeks, helping me memorize lines, teaching me to find the emotion behind the words rather than just the words themselves. Slowly, something miraculous happened. Romeo, passionate, impulsive, willing to die for love, started to make sense in a way that regular words never had. Opening night, standing backstage in a rented costume too big for me, I felt something I'd never experienced, the possibility of transformation. Out there in the dark, people were waiting to see if I could become someone else. Someone brave. Someone worthy of attention. The curtain rose. The lights blazed down, but soft. What light through yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. The gymnasium fell silent. I could feel every person's attention like a physical force. And in that moment, standing in a pool of stage lights, I understood I wasn't broken. I was different, and different could be powerful. The applause was thunderous. But more important was the feeling inside me, like I could do anything, like I was fearless. "Remember that feeling, Thomas?" Miss Patterson told me afterward. "That's what it feels like to be in control." High school brought wrestling, football, more theater. By senior year, I was the lead in every production. Local directors praised my fearless commitment. The same qualities that made me difficult, my restlessness, my need to push boundaries, made me electric on stage. But the real world had teeth. Los Angeles hit like a physical blow. I lived in a studio apartment smaller than my childhood bedroom, surviving on top ramen and the occasional catering job. Audition after audition. Rejection after rejection. Too short. Too intense. Not leading man material. Each no dragged me back to that 10-year-old boy who couldn't read, couldn't fit in, couldn't do anything right. One particularly brutal day, 7 rejections in a single afternoon. I sat in my car outside a casting office in Burbank, crying like I hadn't since childhood. My phone rang. Mom's voice from Louisville. "How are you doing, honey?" Something in her tone told me she already knew. "I'm failing, Mom. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe I should give up." The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then her voice, harder than I'd ever heard it. "Thomas Cruise Maypother 4, listen to me. Your whole life, people have told you what you couldn't do, couldn't read properly, couldn't learn like other kids, couldn't amount to anything. Every single time, you prove them wrong. You think I worked 3 jobs so you could quit the first time Hollywood hurt your feelings. What if I'm not good enough? Good enough for who? For people who don't know you." Her voice softened. "Baby, you were born to do impossible things. I've known it since you were 5 and climbed that maple tree in our backyard. Theo and the older kids said was too tall. I remember that tree, the way my heart pounded as I climbed higher than any reasonable person would go. The view from the top, the feeling of having conquered something everyone said was beyond me. The difference between you and every other kid in Hollywood," she continued, "is that you understand what it means to fight. Don't stop now." That night, standing in front of my bathroom mirror, too short, too young, too desperate, I made myself a promise. I would never let fear decide my limits. Not fear of rejection, failure, or being broken. If he was going to fail, it would be because I wasn't good enough, not because I wasn't brave enough. And when I made it, not if, when every emotion, every action, every moment on screen would be real, mine. The breakthrough came 6 months later. Endless love, barely 3 scenes, but I attacked it like Hamlet. Director Franco Zeffirelli pulled me aside after my first day. "Where did that intensity come from? It's like you were actually living those moments." I thought about telling him the truth, that I've been living those moments my entire life, that every character was just another version of the scared, angry kid who'd grown up an outsider. Instead, I smiled. "I don't know any other way." "Good," he said. "Don't learn any other way. Risky business, changed everything. The scene where Joel dances in his underwear wasn't scripted. It was just me, alone in a house, letting go of every inhibition. When director Paul Brickman saw the dailies, he knew he'd captured something special. "That's the real you," he said. He was wrong. That wasn't the real me. That was who I'd always wanted to be. Fearless, uninhibited, completely alive. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the real Tom Cruise was whoever I chose to become when the cameras rolled and anything was possible. The stunts started small. A fight scene here, a car chase there. I insisted on doing the action myself. Directors loved it because it looked authentic. Insurance companies hated it because it was dangerous. But for me, it was about something deeper than authenticity. It was about control. For the first time in my life, I was making the decisions. I was choosing the risk, choosing to push the boundary, choosing to transform fear into something useful. No teacher could hold me back. No casting director could reject me. No critic could diminish me when I was hanging from a building or racing amateur cycle at 120 miles per hour. The stunts became my signature, my promise to audiences that what they were seeing was real. But they were also my promise to myself, that the boy who couldn't read would grow up to do impossible things. Just before my father died, when I was already famous but still somehow that scared kid inside, he gave me the compass I wore around my neck. "I never understood you," he said, his voice weak from cancer. "Never understood why you had to make everything so dangerous. But I'm proud of you, son. You became somebody I never thought you could be." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get. And sitting in that helicopter, feeling the engines vibrate through my bones as we prepared for takeoff, I realized it was enough. The helicopter lifted off and London fell away below us. The little boy who'd cried over words that will make sense was about to hang from an aircraft 5,000 feet above the earth. Not because he had to, but because he'd chosen to. Fear had defined the first half of my life. For the second half, I was going to define fear. The memory snapped shut like a trapdoor. One second, I was 10 years old, crying over impossible words. The next, I was back in a helicopter, the engines screaming around me like caged beasts. The present hit me with brutal clarity. The taste of metal in my mouth. The weight of the harness cutting into my shoulders. The cameras positioned at 7 different angles, their red lights blinking like mechanical eyes. Everything I'd ever been, everything I'd ever overcome, had led to this moment suspended 5,000 feet above London. "Tom, we're at altitude." Marcus's voice crackled through my headset. Beginning approach to the filming zone. Through the window, the city spread out below us like a circuit board. The Thames snaked through it all, dark and indifferent. From up here, the world looked fragile, like something you could fall right through. Wade's voice cut through the engine noise. Final equipment check. Harness connection, secure. Primary cable, tested and verified. We're green across the board. Each word was a lifeline and a death sentence rolled into one. Everything perfect on paper. Everything depending on physics and the assumption that nothing would go wrong. Weather's holding steady. Marcus continued. 14 knots, gust to 18. We're at the edge, but we read good. 18-knot gusts. The edge of our safety envelope. Anything over 20 men aboard. But 18 was still green. Barely. The helicopter banked sharply left, and my stomach dropped. Through the headset, I could hear the distant chatter of ground control, camera operators, the medical team standing by. 47 people, all focused on watching me risk everything for 30 seconds of film. McQuarrie's voice came through, steady but tight. "Tom, you climb out on the port side, secure position, then we begin the sequence." 3 banking turns, altitude drop of 800 feet. 90 seconds exposed. Exposed. That was one way to put it. Dangling from a cable while 2 tons of aircraft executed maneuvers in thin air. If anything failed, I would fall nearly a mile to the London pavement below. "Copy," I said, but my voice sounded strange. Distant. My phone buzzed. "Surrey. Dad. I know you can't answer right now, but I love you. Please come home safe." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. 24 years old, and she's still worried about her crazy father. Part of me wanted to text back, to tell her everything would be fine. But another part knew that would be a lie. Another message from my mother. Thomas, I'm watching the news. Remember that tree in the backyard. Some things are worth climbing, even when they scare you. The tree, 5 years old, and the older kids had dared me to climb it. Too high for a little kid, they'd said, but I had made it, branch by branch, until I was higher than I'd ever been. The view from up there had been incredible, but more important was the feeling. I'd done something everyone said was impossible. 2 minutes to position, Marcus announced. The helicopter's movements became more aggressive, banking and turning as we approached filming coordinates. Through my headset, I could hear cameras adjusting, operators calling out focus marks. But underneath all that professional chatter, I sensed something else. Fear. Not just mine, everyone's. Tom, Wade's voice again, quieter now. Personal. I need to ask you one more time. You sure about this? It was the same question he'd asked on the ground, but it carried different weight now. Down there, if that had been theoretical. Up here with the door 3 feet away and the sky waiting beyond it, it was real. I looked at my hands. Steady. My heartbeat was elevated but controlled. My breathing was deep and regular. My mind was clear. I'm sure, I said. The voices in my headset began to fade as I entered the zone. That mental space where everything non-essential fell away, leaving only the stunt, the equipment, and physics. Fear was there, but it had transformed into fuel. The electric certainty that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. We're in position, Marcus announced. Altitude 5,240 feet. All systems green. Through the window, I could see the camera helicopter 200 feet away, its lens pointed at us. Below, London sprawled in all directions, beautiful and deadly. If I fell from this height, I would have 90 seconds to think about it before I hit the ground. But I wasn't going to fall. I'd built my entire career on finding the margin for error and living inside it. Tom, you're clear to move to the door, Wade said. Take your time. I unbuckled my restraint and turned toward the port side door. 3 feet away, the distance between safety and legend. My hand closed around the door handle. Cold metal, perfectly engineered, tested to specifications that existed nowhere else on Earth. Radio check, I said. Copy you clear, Tom. All cameras rolling. I turned the handle. The door cracked open, and immediately the sound changed. The muffled roar becoming a violent symphony of wind and metal. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of jet fuel and altitude and possibility. Door is open, I shouted over the wind. Moving to position, the city fell away below me like a drop into forever. The wind grabbed at my clothes, trying to pull me out into the void. This was it. Everything I'd ever learned about courage, about transforming fear into action, would either save my life or end it. I grabbed the safety cable, tested the connection one more time. Solid. I swung my right leg out, placing me booed on the landing skid. The helicopter shuddered slightly, and I felt the aircraft's power transmitted directly through my body. Position 1 achieved, I called out. Moving to full exterior. Both feet on the skid now. Both hands gripping the safety line. Nothing between me and a mile-long fall except physics, engineering, and faith. The harness cut into my shoulders as it took my full weight. The cable stretched slightly, normal, expected, but my stomach clenched anyway. This was where theory became reality. Full exterior position achieved, I called out. Beginning sequence in 3, 2. That's when I felt it. A sudden, violent gust of wind from the east, stronger than anything we'd calculated for. The helicopter lurched sideways, and I felt the cable stretch further than it should have. Abort! Wade's voice screamed through my headset. Wind shear. Abort! But I was already committed, already hanging from an aircraft fighting to stay stable in air that had suddenly turned hostile. The safety line jerked tight, and I heard a sound that chilled my blood. A sharp metallic ping. The cable was starting to fray. Time slowed. Below me, London spun as the helicopter fought the wind. Above me, Marcus struggled toward gain control. And hanging between earth and sky, suspended by equipment that was beginning to fail, he heard another ping. Then another. The sound of metal under too much stress. The sound of physics winning. Another ping. Sharper this time, like a rifle crack in the wind. The cable jerked downward, and I dropped 3 inches before it caught again. My stomach lurched into me, throat, as London rushed up to meet me, then fell away as the line held. Through my gloves, I could feel individual strands of metal wire snapping under the strain. Cable failure. Wade's voice screamed through my headset. Tom, the primary line is compromised. You need to get back inside now. But the helicopter was bucking like a wild horse, fighting winds that had come out of nowhere. Every time I tried to pull myself toward the cabin door, another gust would slam us sideways, swinging me out into empty space like a pendulum made of flesh and bone. The sound was overwhelming, engines roaring at maximum power, rotors chopping the air into submission, wind howling through the open door with the voice of something alive and hungry. Below, the Thames twisted like a silver snake, and I could see traffic crawling along the streets like ants. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that Tom Cruise was about to die 5,000 feet above their heads. Marcus, McQuarrie's voice, tight with panic. Can you stabilize? Can you get us level? I'm trying, the pilot shouted back, his voice strained with effort. Wind shear is massive. We've got downdrafts and crosswinds. I've never seen anything like this. The helicopter lurched violently to the left, and I felt my right glove start to slip on the safety line. The leather was slick with sweat despite the cold, and my fingers were going numb from gripping so hard. I looked down at my hands and saw something that made my blood freeze, a thin line of red where the fraying cable had started to cut through the glove and into my palm. Tom, listen to me. Wait again, his voice cutting through the chaos. You need to activate the emergency release. Cut the primary line and trust the backup system. The emergency release. A simple mechanism designed to sever the main cable if it became compromised, leaving me suspended by a secondary line that was thinner, lighter, completely untested under these conditions. It was supposed to be a fail-safe, but using it now would be like jumping from a building and hoping the fire department would catch me. Another violent gust hit us, stronger than before. The helicopter rolled 30 degrees to starboard, and suddenly I wasn't hanging beneath the aircraft anymore. I was flying alongside it, held in place by Aceable that was singing with tension. Through the cabin window, I could see the crew inside, their faces pressed against the glass, watching me fight for my life in real time. Time dilated, the way it always did in moments of absolute crisis. I could see everything with hypernatural clarity, the individual droplets of moisture on my visor, the way the city lights below created patterns like a vast constellation, the precise angle of the rotors as Marcus fought to regain control. But I could also feel time running out, measured in the steady rhythm of metal strands snapping one by one. Ping, ping, ping. My vision started to blur at the edges, whether from altitude, fear, or the beginning stages of shock, I couldn't tell. The harness was cutting off circulation to my legs, and my arms burned with the effort off maintaining my grip. Every muscle in my body was screaming for relief, but there was nowhere to rest, nowhere to pause, nowhere to be safe. That's when it hit me. Not another gust of wind, but a memory so vivid it felt like time travel. I was 5 years old again, halfway up that maple tree in our backyard in Syracuse, frozen with terror as I looked down at the ground far below. The older kids were laughing, pointing, calling me names. Come down, little Tommy. It's too high for babies. But my mother's voice had cut through their mockery, clear and strong. Don't look down, sweetheart. Look up. Always look up. I'd followed her advice, focusing on the branch above me instead of the fall below. One handhold at a time, one branch higher, until I'd reached the top and could see for miles in every direction. The view had been incredible, but the real victory was simpler. I hadn't let fear decide my limits. Tom, Wade's voice brought me crashing back to the present. The backup cable is rated for static load only. If you release the primary while we're in this turbulence, the secondary might not hold. He was right, of course. The backup system was designed to support my weight if I was hanging motionless beneath a stable aircraft. It was never meant to handle the dynamic forces of a helicopter fighting hurricane-strength winds. Using it now would be gambling my life on equipment that was operating outside its design parameters. But the primary cable was failing anyway. I could hear it in the increasing frequency of the pings, could feel it in the way the line stretched and contracted with each gust. I had maybe 30 seconds before it snapped completely, and when it did, there would be no backup system, no emergency release, nose-con chances. The choice was simple: trust the untested backup system, or die when the primary cable failed. I reached for the emergency release with my right hand, my fingers fumbling for the red handle, through blood-slick gloves. The mechanism was simple: pull the handle, sever the primary line, transfer all my weight to the backup cable. Simple in concept, terrifying in execution. "Tom, don't." McQuarrie's voice was barely audible over the wind. "We can get you back inside. Give us 30 more seconds." But we didn't have 30 seconds. We had maybe 10, and that was optimistic. The cable was singing now, a high-pitched whine that spoke of metal at the absolute edge of its endurance. Any moment now, physics would win, and I would fall. I closed my eyes and saw my daughter's face. 24 years old, beautiful, brilliant, worried about her father who insisted on hanging from helicopters for a living. What would I tell her if I survived this? What would be my last words if I didn't? "Suri," I whispered into the wind, my voice lost in the chaos. "I'm sorry." I pulled the release. The primary cable snapped away from the helicopter with a sound like a gunshot, and suddenly I was falling, not the mile-long plummet I'd feared, but a stomach-lurching 10-foot drop before the backup line caught me with a jerk that nearly dislocated my shoulders. The secondary cable held, but it was thinner than the primary, more elastic, and it stretched under my weight in a way that made Mistamok lurch with each oscillation. I bounced up and down beneath the helicopter like a yo-yo, the city spinning dizzily below me as Marcus fought to stabilize our flight path. "Primary cable is severed," I shouted into my headset, my voice hoarse from screaming. "Secondary line is shouldering, but I'm getting major oscillation." "Copy that." Wade's voice was tight with relief and terror in equal measure. "Marcus, we need to get Tasmuth air. Tom can't hold this position much longer." The pilot was already working on it, banking the helicopter toward calmer sky, but every maneuver sent me swinging out into space like a human pendulum. My gloves were completely shredded now, and I could feel blood running down my wrists where the backup cable was cutting into my hands. But I was alive. Against all odds, all logic, all reasonable expectations, I was still breathing. "How are the cameras?" I managed to gasp into my headset. There was a moment of stunned silence before McQuarrie's voice came through, incredulous. "Are you seriously asking about the cameras right now? Did we get it?" I insisted, still swinging beneath the aircraft like a broken marionette. "Did we get the shot?" "Jesus Christ, Tom." Wade laughed, and I could hear tears in his voice. "Yes, we got it. All 7 cameras captured the whole thing. It's going to be the most insane stunt footage ever recorded." The helicopter finally found smooth air, and my wild oscillations gradually damped down to a gentle sway. My vision was clearing, the adrenaline in my system slowly being replaced by exhaustion so profound I could barely think. But we weren't finished yet. I still had to get back inside the cabin, and with me hands destroyed and my strength nearly gone, that was going to be its own kind of impossible. "Tom, we're going to bring you up slowly." Wade's voice was steady now, professional. "Don't try to help. Just let the winch do the work. Save whatever strength you have left." The winch. I'd forgotten about the mechanical system designed to pull me back inside if I couldn't climb on my own. It engaged with a low mechanical whine, and slowly, so slowly, I felt myself being drawn up toward the open cabin door. Marcus held the helicopter in a perfect hover as the winch pulled me in. Through the cabin windows, I could see the faces of the crew, cameramen, sound engineers, safety coordinators, all staring at me with expressions that mixed relief, admiration, and something that looked very much like fear. When I was close enough, hands reached out to grab me, pulling me through the door and onto the cabin floor. The moment my body hit solid surface, my legs gave out completely. I lay there on the metal floor, breathing hard, staring up at the cabin ceiling while the crew worked to disconnect my harness and check for injuries. "Tom, can you hear me?" Wade's face appeared above me, his weathered features creased with concern. "How are you feeling?" "Alive," I managed to croak, and it was the most beautiful word I'd ever spoken. A paramedic was already working on my hands, cleaning the cuts, and checking for nerve damage. The wounds looked worse than they were dramatic but shallow, the kind of injuries that would heal in a week or two. My shoulders felt like they'd been dislocated and reset, and my entire body was shaking with exhaustion and residual adrenaline. But I was alive. Not just alive, triumphant. We pulled it off. Despite the equipment failure, despite the unexpected weather, despite every rational voice screaming that this was impossible, we'd captured something that had never been done before. "The footage," I said, struggling to sit up. "I want to see the footage." McCory was already queuing it up on a tablet, his hands shaking as he worked the controls. The screen flickered to life, showing the view from camera 3, a wide shot of the helicopter with me hanging from the side as we banked through the London sky. What I saw took my breath away. It looked impossible, supernatural, like something from a dream. The helicopter moving through space with mechanical precision while I swung beneath it like a human flag. The city spinning below us in a dizzying kaleidoscope of lights and shadows. And then the moment when a cable snapped. You could actually see it happening, see the precise instant when physics and engineering met human will, and somehow, impossibly, human will won. "My God," McCory whispered, staring at the screen. "People are going to think this is CGI. They're not going to believe it's real." I looked around the cabin at the faces of the crew, who just watched me nearly die for their cameras. Wade, whose hands were still shaking as he secured the emergency equipment. Marcus, whose skill had probably saved my life when the wind shear hit. The cameraman who'd kept rolling even when it looked like they were about to film a man falling to his death. "They'll believe it," I said, my voice stronger now. Because it was real. Every second of it was real. The helicopter banked toward the airfield, and through the windows I could see London spreading out below us, beautiful and indifferent. Somewhere down there, people were going about their normal lives, completely unaware that something impossible had just happened in the sky above their heads. I closed my eyes and felt the aircraft's vibrations through my entire body, a mechanical heartbeat that spoke of engineering triumph and human audacity. In a few hours, this would be just a story we told. In a few months, it would be a sequence in a movie. But right now, in this moment, it was pure, distilled life, the kind of aliveness that came from standing at the absolute edge of what was possible and taking one step further. The boy who couldn't read had learned to fly. Silence. After 3 hours of roaring engines, screaming wind, and shouted commands, the airfield hangar was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. The helicopter sat motionless on the tarmac outside, its rotors finally still, its engines cooling with soft metallic ticks. The smell of jet fuel lingered in the air, mixing with the antiseptic scent of the medical station where I sat getting my hands bandaged. The medic, a young woman with steady fingers and kind eyes, worked without speaking, cleaning the cuts where the fraying cable had sliced through my gloves. The wounds were shallow but numerous, crisscrossing my palms like evidence of what we'd survived. She wrapped each hand carefully in white gauze, turning my fingers into clumsy, mittened things. "You want to keep these dry for at least a week," she said finally, her first words since starting her work. "And try not to grip anything too tightly." I almost laughed. Try not to grip anything too tightly. If only she knew that gripping tightly, to cables Torcraft, to impossible dreams, was basically my job description. Around the hangar, the crew moved in slow motion, packing equipment with the deliberate care of people who were still processing what they'd witnessed. Wade sat on a folding chair 20 feet away, staring at nothing, occasionally shaking his head like he couldn't quite believe we were all still alive, that McCory was hunched over his tablet, reviewing the footage frame by frame, his face cycling between amazement and something that looked like trauma. The adrenaline had long since drained from my system, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion that made every movement feel like I was moving through water. But underneath the fatigue was something else, a strange kind of peace. The quiet satisfaction that came from having looked death in the eye and walked away on my own terms. My phone buzzed. A text from Surrey. "Dad, I saw on the news that you landed safely. Thank God. I love you." I stared at the screen, trying to figure out how to text back with bandaged hands. After several clumsy attempts, I managed, "Love you too, kiddo. Home soon." But home felt like a foreign concept right now. Where was home for someone like me? The house in Beverly Hills, with its perfect security and pristine silence? The hotel suites in whatever city was hosting the current production? Or was it here, in moments like this, surrounded by the aftermath of controlled chaos and the people who'd chosen to follow me into the impossible? "Tom." Wade's voice broke through my thoughts. He'd walked over without my noticing, and now stood beside my chair with an expression I'd never seen before. "I need to ask you something." "Shoot." "Was it worth it?" The question hung in the air between us. Not the practical concerns that usually followed a stunt, but the simple, essential question that cut to the heart of everything. I looked around the hangar, at the crew still processing what they'd witnessed, at the helicopter that had nearly become my hearse. Then I thought about the footage we'd captured, the impossible thing that was now preserved forever. "Yeah," I said simply. "It was." Wade nodded slowly, like that was the answer he'd expected. "Your father would have been proud." The words hit me harder than I'd expected. My father, who'd never understood my need to throw myself off buildings and out of aircraft, who'd spent most of my childhood predicting I'd come to a bad end. The same man who'd given me his compass before he died, who'd finally admitted he was proud of the person I'd become. I touched the compass around my neck. Somehow it had survived the stunt intact, its needle still pointing faithfully toward magnetic north. Toward home, whatever that meant. He would have been terrified, I corrected. But yeah, I think he would have been proud too. The sun was setting outside the hangar doors, painting the London sky in shades of orange and gold that reminded me of the stage lights from my first theater performance. That night, standing in front of an audience of parents and teachers, I discovered that I could be someone other than the kid who couldn't tread. Tonight, hanging from a helicopter 5,000 feet above the earth, I discovered something else. There was no limit to who I could become. My mother's voice echoed in my memory, clear as if she were standing beside me. "Don't look down, sweetheart. Look up. Always look up." I'd spent 59 years following that advice, looking up toward the next impossible thing, the next boundary to cross, the next moment when I could prove that limits were just suggestions. But sitting here in the quiet aftermath, I finally understood something that had taken me decades to learn. Looking up wasn't about ignoring the ground. It was about acknowledging the danger, respecting it, and choosing to climb anyway. The medic finished with my hands and stepped back, studying her work with professional satisfaction. "All done. Try to take it easy for the next few days." Take it easy. Another piece of advice that would be nearly impossible to follow. But maybe for once I could try. Maybe I could spend a few days remembering what it felt like to have my feet on solid ground, to breathe air that wasn't rushing past at 120 miles per hour, to exist in a world where the only thing trying to kill me was time. McCory approached with his tablet, the screen showing a freeze frame from the stunt sequence. Me, hanging from the helicopter's side, the city spread out below like a vast circuit board. In the image, it looked impossibly small against the massive sky, a tiny figure suspended between Earth and heaven by nothing more than physics and faith. "The studio executives have already seen the footage," he said quietly. "They're calling it the greatest stunt ever captured on film." I studied the image, seeing it as others would see it in darkened theaters around the world. They would watch this moment and wonder how we'd done it, whether it was real or just another Hollywood illusion. They would never know about the cable fraying, about the wind shear that nearly killed us all, about the 10 seconds when I was certain I was about to fall. And that was okay. The audience didn't need to know about the fear, the doubt, the moment when Id whispered an apology to my daughter while hanging by a thread 5,000 feet above London. They just needed to believe that the impossible was possible. You know what the best part is? McCory continued. When people see this, they're going to know it's surreal. Not because of the special effects or the camera angles, but because there's something in your face during that sequence. Something that can't be faked. What's that? He smiled. The look of someone who's exactly where they're supposed to be, doing exactly what they were born to do. I nodded, understanding what he meant. In that frozen frame, hanging from the helicopter, I looked exactly like the 10-year-old boy who'd climbed higher in that maple tree than any reasonable person would go. Scared but determined. Aware of the danger, but committed to the climb. The hangar was emptying now, crew members heading back to their hotels, equipment being loaded into trucks for transport back to the studios. Soon it would just be me and the quiet, left alone with mythoughts and the lingering smell of jet fuel and possibility. I stood up, testing my balance on legs that still felt shaky. Through the open hangar doors, I could see the last light of day fading from the London sky. Stars were beginning to appear, tiny points of light in the vast darkness. From down here, they looked impossibly distant, but I knew that was just a matter of perspective. Everything was possible if you were willing to climb high enough. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from my mother. Saw the news footage. That was quite a tree you climbed today, sweetheart. I smiled, finally understanding something that had taken me 59 years to figure out. I'd never been fearless. Fear had been my constant companion through every death-defying stunt, every impossible leap, every moment when I'd chosen to push beyond the boundaries of what seemed possible. The difference was that I'd learned to climb with fear as my co-pilot, to let it sharpen my focus instead of paralyze my will. Fear wasn't the enemy, it was fuel. And as long as I had the courage to keep climbing, to keep looking up toward the next impossible thing, there was no limit to how high I could go. I walked toward the hangar doors, my bandaged hands at my sides, my body exhausted, but my spirit somehow lighter than it had been in years. Behind me, the helicopter sat silent on the tarmac, its mission complete. Ahead of me, the London night stretched out like a promise. My phone buzzed one more time. Another message from my mother. Saw the news footage. That was quite a tree you climbed today, sweetheart. I stopped walking and stared at the screen, smiling. Then I typed back slowly with my bandaged fingers. Thanks for teaching me to look up. I slipped the phone into my pocket and stepped out into the night air, where the sounds of the city, traffic and voices and life, continuing in all its ordinary, extraordinary ways, surrounded me like a familiar song. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and leave a like. That way, you'll always be with us discovering the secrets and untold sides of the most famous lives in history.